We're continuing to follow breaking news out of Perry, Iowa. The local sheriff's office confirms for CBS News that there has been a shooting at Perry High School. That's about 40 miles northwest of Des Moines. Our Ed O'Keefe, who has just arrived on the scene, tells us police are sending parents to a nearby community center. Today was the first day back in school for students after the holiday break. So I want to bring in Michael Balboni. He is going to give us some analysis. He's a former New York State Homeland Security Advisor, and he's the president and managing director of Redland Strategies. Thank you so much for joining us. We want to let people know that the information that we just gave you is basically all we know right now. We don't know about the shooter. We don't know about injuries or anything along those lines. But we do know that this is kind of your classic soft target. It's a school. It's meant to be open to the public with some security measures, but generally open. Michael, tell us about the kind of response that happens when an incident like this occurs. We're showing people live video right now. We see a lot of police cruisers. We see fire trucks there. What sort of response would be going on?
So, high school presents a uniquely complex scenario, because what you have in there, you have a lot of, obviously, kids of various ages, and they all have cell phones, and they're talking to one another, and then they're going to, as soon as something happens, they're going to start putting out information. That information coming from a scene has always been wrong in the first instances. It's just one of these weird things about an emergency situation. The information you get is wrong. So as police are coming in, they have the imperative to go in and stop the shooter. That's been a strategy for law enforcement ever since Columbine. But the problem, of course, is that you have people coming in and out of that facility, as you pointed out. It's meant to be open to the public. But now you have folks that are sending, this happened in the Florida shootings, where you have all these different images that are coming. So trying to find what the truth is in a chaotic situation like this is very difficult. What it seems here, and again, we don't have a lot of information right now, it seems that the active shooter is no longer active. So whatever that means. And we obviously don't know the extent of injuries, but we do know that ambulances have been very active on the scene itself.
So we're looking at these live pictures, and our audience is seeing them, and they're seeing this large response. What does that tell you when you just by looking at the images that we're seeing on our screen, which is, dozens of police vehicles, dozens of fire trucks, and other EMT personnel? What does that say?
So it says to me that they've obviously set a perimeter. They're trying to make sure that they know who's coming in and out of that building, but they're not standing around their cars. So obviously they're engaged. They're probably in the facility itself. And as I mentioned before, their main thing is to go in and secure the shooter, hopefully arrest the individual. But typically what happens in these types of situations is the shooter takes his or her own life in a matter of minutes after this happens. That's what we've seen in all the different shootings across, unfortunately, decades. So what it says to me is that this is still perhaps not an active shooter situation, but the police and law enforcement have responded in a very large manner, and that they're in the facility trying to figure out what actually happened.
When something like this happens, there are multiple law enforcement agencies getting involved, the FBI, the ATF, obviously the sheriff. Can you sort of give us a sense of what role all of these agencies would be playing in this investigation?
So again, you can, when you go into a situation like this, you don't know what you're going to find. And we really go back to the baseline of Columbine, where the individuals did not only have weapons, they actually had explosive devices. That's probably why ATF is in there, to make sure that there are no explosive devices included as well, to secure the scene, to make sure there's no other individuals may be involved, other weapons. That's really what the ATF and the FBI are going to be doing here.
And so, I mean, what I find sort of interesting, Michael, is that there's a press conference that is scheduled for about a half hour from now. In your mind and in your experience, would the police be holding a press conference so soon to whenever this happened if they didn't have at least some answers to give to the public?
Yeah. Well, to your point, they wouldn't be holding a press conference if the scene wasn't secured.
Right.
Right. So that is something we can definitely assume at this point in time, that the scene is secured. And what they're going to be talking, what's the constituency that they have to address first? The parents. Everybody is frightened beyond belief that their child might have been involved in this. They don't know the extent of any injuries. They don't know who's going to be transported, not transported to the hospitals. That information will be coming out, in dribs and drabs. But again, the main thing is that the scene has been secured, that there are no additional threats, and that they know that the person who perpetrated this has been effectively stopped.
Over the years, obviously, we've covered, sadly, a number of school shootings. And whenever we do, the conversation about security at schools comes up. I mean, I would argue that certainly since we were in school, Vlad, the level of security has significantly gone up.
Oh, yeah.
I can't go to my kid's school and just walk in the door.
I remember as a kid in the 70s, my dad showing up in homeroom.
Right. That doesn't happen, right? Usually, most of these schools, at minimum, there's a buzzer system. They look at you. They want to know who you are. And no one gets past the front office. Yep. So, there's probably some sort of security measures in place. But I want to go back to this idea of the soft target and the challenge when it comes to schools. You don't want kids to feel like they're, going to school in some sort of secured environment where they're on lockdown or something like that. But can we talk a little bit about what you've seen in terms of how security has evolved at schools, whether enough is being done or the right things are being done? Because sometimes you can spend a lot of money, but it's actually not making much of a difference.
Such a good point. I've participated and done a variety of different school safety, school security evaluations over the years. And what you find is that very difficult needle to thread between privacy, freedom of education, and security itself. But you're right. The security has changed dramatically in terms of who's allowed on to a school campus, whether it's high school or college, and in the ability to try to detect what is going on in the schools through cameras, outside of the schools, fencing, those types of things. But you still don't have the magnetometer in the school, so that you have to, so you could determine whether or not someone's got a weapon. You don't do backpack searches. Those are two things in and of itself that would probably provide a lot of deterrence to these types of things. But then what we saw in Texas was somebody left the door ajar, and someone got that way. So as soon as you go to one way, there is no one-size-fits-all security fix when it comes particularly to this type of education level. You've got kids coming in, they've got backpacks, you don't know when there's a weapon at home. That happened in that horrific shooting in Connecticut. You don't know how they're going to get in. And the perimeter itself, you can take all the steps you want. You cannot 100% guarantee that nobody will get in. That determined, assailant, determined shooter won't be able to get in.
Yeah.
So the other question, of course, that we're going to have is how often in your experience, I mean, we see this obviously taking place at a school, but there have been incidences where an adult has gotten into a school or a place of business because their significant other works there, or it's just hard to know because we don't have any information. But what is the most common, in your experience, level of violence or form of violence that you've seen with guns? Is it that children are being targeted, or is it other?
It typically is other. You have a domestic violence situation where husband and wife are fighting, and the individual shows up to take it out on the spouse who works at the school, or there's a disagreement over trying to take a child out of the school.
Right.
That typically has been some of the source of those conflicts. Again, going back to Columbine, where you have students who go inside and decide to create mayhem and kill their classmates. That typically is not the case in these types of shootings.
Yeah, I was going to say, Michael, that's an excellent point that I'm glad you're making it, because there are probably, I mean, in terms of something rising to the level of the national media attention, which is what this is clearly at this point, there are probably everyday incidences that are happening in schools, in places of business across the country, much to the scenarios that you're describing, that we don't talk about, that we don't air on national television.
So, it's just the fact of the matter is we always go to where there are, injuries, multiple injuries. If there's a domestic shooting domestic violence shooting in a parking lot typically does not get covered, except locally. These types of things, though, because everyone has children in school, this is of national interest. In fact, this is of interest across the globe. To how do we keep our kids safe? How do we provide them with a great learning experience, but at the same time, make sure that nobody get in who shouldn't be there? Again, it's that constant balance. And there is no right or wrong 100% solution to this type of an issue.
Michael Balboni, thank you so much for your insight and analysis. We appreciate it, especially in a story where there is not a lot of information coming to us. Your insights are incredibly beneficial. We appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, we're expecting a press conference out of Iowa. There you can see state troopers are on the scene, as well as other local police, as they investigate what is being reported as a shooting of some type at Perry High School in Iowa. There's a press conference that's scheduled in just about 20 minutes or so. We're obviously going to bring that to you live right here on CBS News, so stick around.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
There is no more room in our city.
New York City is receiving record numbers of migrants.
Today, we're going to have more than 500 adults and children come through that door.
Tensions rise as shelters reach max capacity.
We don't have to take care of them.
CBS Reports goes inside a crisis cities and families are facing as they fight to survive.
The United States still has that glimmer of hope for people to come here.
Fighting for a future. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She's a country music legend, philanthropist, fashion icon, and now rock star.
I think there's a lot to be said about being comfortable with who you are.
Find out what's next for Dolly Parton when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
That desired farm, it's a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She is a beloved American icon and head of a media empire. But is Oprah Winfrey happy? How do you define happiness?
Yeah, I call it happiness.
Find out when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
It was genocide, a deliberate effort by the United States government to eliminate the food source that was relied upon by Native American tribes.
American bison were slaughtered and Native Americans displaced.
And that's how tribes were subjugated to reservations and our lands were taken.
But now, through conservation efforts at Yellowstone,
Buffalo provided everything that we needed. Now they need help.
A herd grows.
We need to step up and help them.
And a culture is reborn.
When the buffalo return and come back, that's when our tribe will begin to heal.
Yellowstone Bison Revival, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to CBS News. We're following some breaking news out of Iowa. Dallas County officials say authorities are investigating an active situation at Perry High School, which is about 40 miles northwest of Des Moines. The local sheriff's office is saying there has been a shooting. For now, we're going to join our affiliate KCCI for more. Here, look at at this.
Community. Here we are in a small town right outside the Des Moines metro area. And this is certainly a situation that has those in this town shaken, visibly shaken, and those who have students who go to school here and even the students themselves. Eric and Alex.
Jody, around you, do you see a lot of parents looking for answers and standing around waiting, or are they, do you have a sense that most of those reconnections have already happened? What are you seeing as you look left and right of you?
As I'm standing here in this area, this isn't really a gathering point, a police checkpoint, if you will. There are a few people here. I know our KCCI's Bo Bowman is talking with a woman right now who is visibly shaken